Hey guys, Kevin for the Americans, Season 4, Episode 7, Travel Agents, and I was really looking forward to this episode. Obviously, you guys know I've been loving this season, and especially last week's episode, I really didn't know where we were headed this season. I mean, a lot of questions were left unanswered as to what was going to happen, what the future was going to be with Martha, how she was going to get out of the situation, how that was all going to play out, and this episode was incredible. I mean, I know I said episode 4 was the best episode of the season. No, this was without a doubt the best episode of the season. I mean, this episode was very sad. It was really tragic at points. But it also seemed very inevitable, and a lot of the things that are happening this season, like I said, a lot of the things that have been not as big concerns in seasons 1 through 3 are much bigger concerns this season. I think this episode really did touch upon that, which is something that I definitely really did love. But let's just get into this episode because I absolutely loved everything about this episode. Like I said, by far best episode of the season. Such a crazy episode. I mean, there were so many crazy scenes in this episode, but let's just get into it because I absolutely loved it. And of course, I love the way this episode starts out because it doesn't start off in the way you think it's going to start off, because as we know, we had that whole conversation between Gabriel and Martha, and right away we see Philip and Elizabeth. They're arriving at the safe house, and Martha's gone. They don't know where she is. She's not there, and Gabriel tells them that Martha ran off. He didn't start because she stood on the street and threatened to call the KGB, and Philip hands over the package they just picked up from William, a dead rat infested with biological warfare, which is crazy that he sent them that. Why he sent them this, I don't know, but basically William has sent him this package. I don't know why he sent this package. He just did. So Philip starts racking his brain about where Martha may have ran off to, because obviously he knows that she went somewhere. He doesn't know where, but he's pretty much saying that they scared her off. And, obviously he's very concerned, and Gabriel tells him to start looking at her church. Elizabeth's going to call Hans to help her look, because that's someone that she can trust and knows that he will help her. So Gabriel will stay by the phone. Gabriel warns Philip that this is serious, and it's a really crazy scene because you see that this is someone that they do want to protect. They don't want to hurt Martha, but obviously this could really, she could expose them, and she already knows way too much, and I think that really is a big theme of this episode, that Martha knows too much, which I really feel just puts her that impending doom that I really feel she is, definitely is going to happen to her. So Gabriel warns Philip that this is serious. Martha's seeing their faces if she starts screaming in public about the KGB. Then Philip is going to have no choice but to kill her, and he needs to realize that he is going to have to kill her. And that's something I think they showed very well in this episode, is that whole situation with Philip. You know that he doesn't want to have to do that, but I think in the back of his mind, he knows that he might end up having to kill her. And you can tell that he's doing whatever he can to not let that happen. Now, while this episode, I think, was a great showcase for Philip, Elizabeth, and Martha, that whole situation that's going on, it was just as great for Stan, Adderholt, Gad, that whole gang. I mean, they had some crazy scenes. This is probably the most we have seen them scrambling. I mean, they are basically just destined to find answers. They want to know what's going on here, and they're as desperate at this point as we are. And I love how desperate they are, because we've seen them construct these sort of things before. We've seen them, accuse people, but again, it hasn't been as big as a deal, because not as much has been on the line. While this season's a lot more on the line, and especially after this episode, I think a lot more is definitely on the line. We see Stan Eberholt, they take Agent Gad aside. They found Clark Westerfeld in Minnesota. He's dead, and apparently Martha's boyfriend stole the identity of a 7-year-old, which is crazy that he did that. But of course, that was the facade that Philip was told to play, and Agent Gad is convinced. He knows that Martha was working as a spy now. He tells him to get a sketch artist to draw up a photo of Clark, and this really changed a lot of things. I mean, before, they really kind of trusted her, but now they're knowing that there definitely is something more going on here. This isn't just some guy that she is dating. There's definitely more to it, and they're destined to find out what that is, and I definitely really did love seeing that. I thought there were some really powerful scenes between all of them this episode. I mean, like I said, some of the best scenes were them scrambling. I thought it was really incredible to watch. So then we see Philip and Elizabeth. They're driving around the city just frantically looking for Martha, and I love this entire episode was just a giant thrill ride. I mean, everyone is scrambling. Everyone is just, it's not balanced at all. This is not a neat mission. This is a mission that has completely gone AWire, and I love that nothing is neat. Everything seems to be going wrong here, and that is when the Americans really at its best. When they pull off missions and they're not going the way they should, that really is some of the best stuff they've done, and basically, they decide to split up. Philip tries to tell her to check in with Gabriel every half hour, and basically, because Gabriel might know her whereabouts. So Phil blames himself for Martha running off. He never should have left her alone with Gabriel, and he really feels that this is his fault, that leaving her alone with Gabriel was a terrible idea, and he kind of scared her off. But Elizabeth warns him that Gabriel is right. He might have to kill her, and What I love about Elizabeth in this episode is not just the fact that, she's telling Philip, bluntly that you're going to have to kill her. It's very much mirrored with what's going on with Pastor Tim and Philip, that sort of dynamic. But it's also the fact that we know Elizabeth's rage for Martha, and we know how she feels about Martha. And one of the best things about Elizabeth's situation is the entire idea of this season, with big ideas, small, with some of the smaller details becoming much bigger details this season, and you definitely see that with Elizabeth. She has this, now that she knows that there's more going on between Martha and Philip, and that this isn't really just some mission anymore, she's obviously very concerned. You can tell by just that one line of her saying that you might have to kill Martha. It's not just about her saying you might have to kill Martha, it's also her kind of getting to, get rid of Martha. You can tell this entire episode, Elizabeth really does want to do something about Martha. I don't really know what capacity, you don't really know what capacity she wants to do about her, but you know that she definitely wants something to be done. And the way that they created those roadblocks for Elizabeth and for Martha in this episode, this really is the episode where that comes to a halt, and I absolutely love that. One of the best things about this episode, without a doubt, and it really just continues that non-stop tension throughout this entire episode. The other part I love with Elizabeth in this episode is that it also shows her consistency as a character. She is willing to kill even though it may hurt someone. She doesn't really care mainly about the emotional damage that it might do to them, while Philip is much more concerned with that, and it's very much like what's going on with her and Pastor Tim. And while I think a lot of people might think, oh, the Martha thing is now secondary, this is no longer secondary. This is a primary thing just because of what was going on with Pastor Tim. Because of her willingness to kill Pastor Tim, we know that she has just as much willingness to kill Martha. And that really kind of scares us because we know that Elizabeth could kill Martha, and I honestly was terrified that she would kill Martha, but the way that they compare that to what's going on with Martha and then what's going on with Pastor Tim, I thought was just seamlessly done perfectly, and I really think they really put that to great use in this episode. But back to the whole Stan side of things. Like I said, Stan and his team, they are completely scrambling around here. They don't know what to do. They're pretty much just as lost as Philip, Elizabeth, and Gabriel are in their situation to find Martha. While they're trying to find information, they're just as lost. And not only have they now found this information, and they're so destined to find out what's going on, they are so desperate that Stan literally sent an entire FBI team searching Martha's apartment for clues. They're taking apart the furniture, looking inside the walls. I mean, it really is crazy. They're even melting her ice cubes and opening unused tampons and looking inside them just to see if maybe they can find some sort of evidence as to what's going on with her, because they really don't trust this woman. This woman that's worked for them all these years suddenly has wronged them, and they don't really know what to do. You can tell they kind of are just out of options here, and Agent Gadd is still upset while everyone tears apart Martha's house. He stares out the window because he really doesn't feel this is the right thing to do. He feels an invasion of privacy. He knows this is wrong, but there's really nothing he can do about it. And I like that Gadd's kind of the unsung one in this situation, that he really doesn't have much control over this situation. Martha, though, however, is still frantically walking down the street. She spots a man in a suit nearby. She's convinced that he is following her, and I like that we did find out what was going on with Martha. Obviously, you knew that was going to happen, but sirens are wailing in the distance. They have her on the verge of a panic attack. She cries and walks in circles. Martha is then freaking out. Obviously, she's freaking out because she knows what kind of situation she's in. She knows what could happen to her. I mean, we, as well, are also terrified for her because, one, we're terrified in the sense that we don't know if she's going to reveal that, these people that she's been working with are KGB, or two, we don't want something bad to happen to her. This entire episode, my pulse was pounding. I had no idea what was going to happen here. I mean, it was a nail-biting, gripping kind of episode, it was crazy what was going on here. I had no idea if Martha was going to get out of the situation, and I was pretty terrified, I have to say. I think they really handled that really, really well, I have to say. So Philip heads to the house where the switchboard operator mans the phone. He waits to see if Martha will call the number that he gave her, and meanwhile, Elizabeth calls and updates him. And just like last week's episode, some of the best scenes in this episode are just the phone conversations between Martha and Philip, because there's a lot of uncertainty in these conversations. Philip's trying to tell her, oh, everything's going to be okay, you're going to get out of this, but you don't really know if that's going to happen. You can tell he's just trying to calm her down, and he just wants her to stay safe, because he knows that, one, I think she is on the verge of suicide at this point, and two, there is the fact that she really is not safe, but he needs to make her feel as safe as possible. So Elizabeth calls and updates him. She and Han still haven't found her. Philip tells Elizabeth to check another place where Martha used to live, to take long walks, because again, they have no idea where she could be. She could literally be in a bevy of places, and of course we know where she is, but they have no idea where she could be at this point. So Basically, at the FBI office, Stan and his team are raking over all the evidence that they can confiscate from Martha's apartment. Gad tells Everholt that they should check all the Lutheran churches in the area, that might just be the best thing to do, because obviously they know that there is the Lutheran church is connected to this, and that Martha herself is Lutheran. And Gad tells Stan to call his KGB contact and play a tape of Martha, see if they have her. Stan refuses. He doesn't want to tip their hat just yet, and meanwhile, they have Martha's parents' phones tapped. Like, they literally tap Martha's parents' phones, which is insane with that they did this. They pick up a phone call from Martha. She calls her parents, tells them that she's in trouble and she can't talk long. And this whole scene was just so well done, because you can just tell that she really, like I said, is on the verge of suicide. And you definitely do see that in the scene. There's no scene that confirms that more than the way this scene was done, without a doubt. I know that I've said throughout this entire season that Martha is on the verge of suicide and that it really seemed like she was going to kill herself. I always got that feeling. And I know some people haven't necessarily said that, but there is no scene that confirms that more than what happens in this next scene. Because this scene, I was freaking out here. I'm like, Martha is going to die here, because she's on the phone with her parents. The agents are able to trace the call to Woodley Park. She's standing on a bridge overlooking a rocky waterfall, contemplating jumping, and she literally is thinking of just jumping because she has no idea what to do. Think of the situation that Martha's in. I mean, she, in one season, has found out that this guy Gene was murdered. That's how this all started. Then she knows that the man that was her husband's actually a KGB agent. The fact that she had to leave her home. The fact that she has this gun. I mean, we know that she's suicidal and that she really is thinking of just ending it all. But you can tell that that's just not how it's going to work. Martha doesn't get to go out that easily. And that's something I really loved about this episode, is that they're not just going to kill Martha off because she can't die that easily. And that's something that is even makes her scenes in this episode even the more tragic. And that's the thing with this next scene, is the fact that they make us think that Martha actually did kill herself. We are wondering, did Martha actually go through this? Because when Stan, Everholt, and the team arrive at the park, Martha's nowhere to be found. And Stan spots the bridge. He says that he thinks Martha may have jumped. Stan thinks she called her parents to say goodbye. They're pretty convinced that she committed suicide, but she's not actually. Mainly because I think Martha just knows that she can't go out this way. She's not just going to end her life because of this. She needs to go on. There's too many other things that are going on that she cares about, that she needs to, worry about, and she can't just end her life. Martha's at a payphone. She calls Philip. He picks up on the first ring, and Martha shouts into the phone that he left her with a stranger, and it made her crazy. And I love that Martha is freaking out here. She finally gets to freak out at him. She finally gets to yell at him like she wanted to, because obviously she had genuine reasons to be upset with Philip. She has every reason to be upset with him. And Philip apologized profusely for leaving her in the house with Gabriel, and he's begging Martha to tell her where she is. And again, just those phone conversation scenes just elevate so much. Just the fact this is over a phone, it just shows how separate these two really are. As close as Philip, I think, wants them to be, they can't be close anymore because she just knows too much. And she cries into the phone that she wants it all to be over. She finally stops crying long enough to tell Phil where she is. He rushes out the door to pick her up, and it's really devastating stuff because, like I said, Martha was contemplating suicide. She was thinking she could just end it all, but she really knows that there really is no way of getting out of this. That's just too simple of a way, and she can't get out of this situation as easily as she wants to, which really does suck because, obviously, I'm not saying I want Martha to kill herself, obviously, but you do want her to be okay, and knowing this, I mean, there really is no hope for Martha whatsoever after this episode, honestly. And the thing is, Martha may not have actually killed herself, but I think throughout this entire episode, you just get that feeling that emotionally she kind of, is. And we see Stan was walking up and down the bridge. He thought Martha may have jumped off. Everholt climbs underneath to check out the rocks, and he really, because they are convinced that Martha may have jumped, and Everholt really wants to know, did she actually jump? And it's a really great scene the way that was done. And then we get the scene that I think best defines this episode. Without a doubt, the scene that most people are talking about comes right after this. The Americans has always had standout scenes. Every episode, they seem to have a huge scene, and of course, I talk about. But in a highly intense episode like this, every scene really is a standout. But there is one scene that I feel best defines this episode without a doubt, and really shows what this episode is really trying to do. Because this scene, we've never seen this kind of tension before. We've never really seen this kind of suspense before. And the way that Carrie Russell just portrayed herself in this scene, I thought was fantastic. Because we see Elizabeth, she arrives at the park before Philip, and Martha's sitting on a park bench by herself, surrounded by trees, and in my mind, I'm just thinking, oh shit, what is gonna happen here? Because you see these two, they're facing off. Elizabeth sneaks up behind her. She tells Martha she came to stay with her until Clark got there, and Martha gets emotional. She demands to know if Elizabeth is sleeping with Clark/Phil, because she knows that this, without a doubt, is definitely not, just Clark's cousin or whatever she's pretending to be. Sister, that's what she's pretending was Clark's sister. She knows for a fact this is not actually Clark's sister, even though she's made her think that. She knows there's more going on here, and Martha has more questions, and it's the perfect example of how Martha can't really get answers, because right when she's about to freak out, basically Elizabeth hits her, she knocks the wind out of her to shut her up, and then orders Martha to come with her now before they all get arrested and their lives are over. And in many ways, I think this is a good thing, because obviously she protected her own ass and protected her cover, but Martha's never going to get those answers that she wants. I think this episode really does show that as much as she wants those answers, she's never really going to get them. And Elizabeth tells Martha that if she comes with her now, she won't have to kill her, and it's a really great scene because you can tell in Elizabeth's mind she wants to kill her. I think she's really thinking, I want to kill her, but she knows that she can't, because she knows the amount of consequence and what that could do to her and the weight that would have on Philip. She just doesn't want to deal with that, which is why she doesn't want to kill her. It's not at all because she feels bad for her, feels empathy for Martha. It's more that she's thinking of the consequences and if this really is going to work out for her. Elizabeth has always been a very level-headed character, while I think Philip's always been portrayed as the more emotional one. And I don't think there's a better portrayal of that than in this scene, which, by the way, Kerry Russell, like I said, acted the hell of, and without a doubt is the standout scene in this episode, without a doubt. And while, as I said, this is without a doubt the most intense scene we have had in this episode, the scene gets even more tragic when Philip arrives at the park a few minutes later, and they're both gone, and he's shouting Martha's name, not knowing what's going on. He gives up, he heads to the payphone, and there are so many things you can imagine are just going through his mind. Did she kill herself? Did she leave? Was she kidnapped? I mean, there's so many things that are going through his mind. You see the genuine concern that he has, and it really does show the way that Elizabeth will handle something and the way that Philip will handle something, and I really think that's something that this episode showed better than really any episode that we've had previous to this one. So because this episode was so intense, obviously there wasn't a lot of time to focus on other things. Mainly we were focused on this whole mission and getting Martha, tracking her down, while we saw, Stan and Gad and all of them trying to hunt her down. We do get some scenes, though, with Henry. Not a lot, but we do get to see some stuff. We see that Henry is still hanging out at Stan's house with his son, and Henry convinces Matthew to let him have a beer, and Paige shows up, and I love that Paige isn't really being authoritative at this point, because she actually decides to have a beer with her brother and Stan's son. So while Stan's out playing a game of cat and mouse with Elizabeth and Philip, their kids are at home getting drunk together, which is very interesting that we saw this. But I think it really does show that Paige doesn't feel she is this authoritative presence anymore, because she just feels that she is a wild card in this whole situation. She doesn't really know how to handle this. She can't really be this figure because she really isn't above them. She doesn't know that much information. She's desperate for information, just like Martha is, and I think that's a very good example of showing how similar Paige and Martha are. It's just the circumstances that they're in. Paige obviously is not as dire as Martha, but I think is in just as, readily is just in need of answers as Martha is, definitely, and I think you definitely do see that here. This also was a way for Paige, of course, to recover what she was going on from, but it really is the only scene we've seen of Paige, and considering we didn't get any of that last week, I like that we did get some scenes with Paige and Henry in this episode, because they are, part of the central cast, and of course, one of the major plots of the season has to do with Paige. We know we're going to come back from that eventually. I don't know when, but we know that eventually we are going to get back to that, just not yet. So after that crazy scene between what's going on with Philip and Elizabeth and all that stuff, Philip does finally get to Martha, which I was very happy about, because I didn't really know if he was actually going to get to her. I thought this episode was going to end up with Martha basically not getting anything that she wants and not getting those answers that she desires. But finally in this scene, he basically is forced to reveal everything. He finds Martha upstairs in the bedroom, recovering from her hit from Elizabeth, and she reassures him that she will be okay, and then demands to know what his real name, because she can tell that he is just as scared and just concerned as she is, and that's something I think they showed very well here. Martha isn't the only one that's freaking out and is terrified for her life. Philip is scared to death of what she's going to do next, and basically, she gets all the answers she wants right here. So Philip tells her straight out that his real name is Philip, but his born name was Mishka, and he heads downstairs to get her some ice. He finds a dead rat in the freezer in a glass next to the ice tray, and you know that this dead rat is going to come back into play in some way, but what I loved about this scene is that Martha basically got everything that she wanted, except for the fact that Elizabeth is, of course, his wife. That's the one thing that he didn't tell her. But the fact that he told her all this says two things. One, there's no way that Martha and Philip are going to be working, that she's going to be part of this mission anymore. There's no way he's going to let her do that. Two, Martha now needs to die because she simply knows too much. And because she knows too much, there's no way she's going to get out of the situation. Eventually, this information is going to get traced back to someone. I know Martha's going to do that, even though I don't think she wants to do that. The emotional wreck that she's been, I really could see Martha just getting this information into the wrong hands, just not realizing that she's doing wrong here. And I really think they showed that really well here. Very powerful scene, very cathartic scene, and it really just felt very worthwhile. It feels like the scene that I didn't really know if we were going to get in this episode, but I think it made the episode all the better because it really did feel like the complete end for Martha, because without a doubt this was Martha's closure episode, which we will get into. But then we get a scene with Oleg and Tatiana, and we didn't see Oleg in last week's episode at all. We didn't see anything going on with that. But basically, now that Oleg no longer is searching for Nina, he now has to have something new to do. Obviously, that Nina is no longer in the loop. She's now gone. He needs to now have something more to do. And it seems like him and Tatiana are teaming up, basically. They're working for, Arcadia and Tatiana, they're working for Oleg, and they're putting together the secret mission to get someone out of the country and back to the SU undetected. And it looks like that it has to be Martha that they're talking about. It would only make sense. I mean, the circumstance that she's in. But how did they know all this? I'm not really sure. Arcady checks to make sure that everything is ready. He tells Oleg and Tatiana that they got her. And basically, they're making it their mission to get Martha's out of there and get her safe. Because obviously, they care about her just as much as Philip and Elizabeth do. And I love that this is finally connecting because it has felt kind of separate. Not necessarily separate, but just another story going on. And since this is connecting, I think it just makes this all the more interesting, and I really did love seeing that. And again, it really does portray that this really is, I think, the official end for Martha, but I think this kind of does show that Martha's not going to go away. She's going for now, but not forever. Like, she's definitely going to come back at some point. And in many ways, I really do see that last scene between Martha and Philip as their goodbye scene. Things aren't going to be the same between these two anymore. Of course, we will see them again, and we do see them at the end of this episode, but that scene really was them just getting to know each other and getting to realize, she now knows everything she needs to know about him. Their life is never going to be the same, and you can tell that now Philip has to go back to Elizabeth, which you're not really sure if he wants to do. We see back at the safe house, Elizabeth tells Philip that he needs to get Martha on the plane, and you can tell everything Elizabeth is feeling finally comes out here because we can tell that she's really getting affected by what's going on. The fact that he was married to another woman. She gets very emotional. She has Philip that the kids were grown when he head back home with Martha and start a new life. And Philip explains that if things are different between him and Martha, he reassures Elizabeth that he loves her, but he has to stay at the safe house with Martha tonight so that she doesn't try to run again because obviously he is terrified for her. He doesn't really know what's going to happen, if she's going to get out of the situation, if she's going to even commit suicide. He just needs to keep watch of her. It's not so much that he loves her, more in the sense that he really deeply cares about her and he really doesn't want to be in this situation. He's really attached to her. And of course, as we know, since the beginning of the season, he's tired of killing. He doesn't want to kill anymore. And that's the one thing he doesn't want to do. He wants to find another option that's not killing Martha. And it really does make sense why this season started with us seeing that flashback of Philip killing me, because that is exactly who he is trying to abandon. He's trying to abandon that Mishka personality, and even though he told Martha that his real name is Mishka, I feel it's kind of him getting over it. It's kind of a relief for him. He doesn't have to pretend anymore, and now that she knows who he really is, he doesn't feel a need to pretend, and these feelings we can tell are very real. He does care about her, he doesn't want her to die, and he really does want to help her, which I thought was very interesting, especially in contrast to Elizabeth, when she's really only doing it because it just protects her, and it saves her from committing an unforgivable act, which obviously she doesn't want to do. So I thought that was very powerful, and I thought they handled that perfectly. But if the Elizabeth and Martha scene is the standout scene in this episode, it's not the most shocking scene. Without a doubt, the most shocking scene comes right after this scene, and this scene just shows that this season stuff is going to get done and that they're not playing around. And I don't think that's more evident than it is here. We see Stan and Gad, they're getting shocking news. Basically, they find out right now, they find out that Martha is married to a KGB officer, that they weren't just dating, and that basically she is married to a KGB officer. And the look on Stan's face here, I don't know if he has this inkling that Philip is KGB, but the fact that he was denying it, I found very interesting. The fact that he's like, no, there's something going wrong here. Maybe Martha and the KGB officer are really in love. And Gad knows his days are numbered and the agency's going to cut him loose. So how does his own secretary, maybe a KGB officer, right under his nose? He doesn't really understand. And it really does make me think that Stan is very close to finding out what's going on with Philip and that he's very close to finding out that reveal. I mean, there's so much evidence that's eventually going to point to that. Now, right now, I don't think he's thinking that Philip is definitely KGB. I don't think that's in his mind right now. But I do think that he is starting to get an inkling that Philip is definitely not someone he can trust, and Philip is definitely someone that is very shady and that they might need to actually get rid of, and I definitely could see that happening this season. I think this really does set the ground for where the FBI is going to be for the rest of the season, which is really going to be crazy to see what happens here. But like I said, crazy stuff with the FBI, scrambling around, just seeing all those scenes with them really were crazy, and I really did love seeing that. So really crazy stuff going on there. So at the safe house, Philip breaks the news to Martha that they're putting her on a plane, sending her to Russia so that she'll be safe. He tells her that she can start over, have a new life, which you can tell she initially doesn't really want to do. She wants to get back to her old life. The problem is she just can't do that anymore. She needs to move on. She needs to get out of the country. She's not safe here anymore. And Martha wants to know when Phil will come to Russia to be with her. He says that he can't come, not even to visit. And it's really sad because you know these two are probably never going to see each other again. And that's the one thing that Martha wants. She genuinely does love Philip. The problem is, for him, this was just a mission that got way too close and really was just, it crossed a line. It really did cross the line. It became a lot more than just a mission, and now he needs to end it before things get worse. So Martha's worried about her parents. We see Philip promises he will get a message to them from her. Martha cries. She doesn't want to be alone again like she was before she met Philip. He promises that the Russians will take good care of her, honor her for the work she has done for them, and it's just a really sad scene here, the way this was done. I mean, you can really tell, like I said, Philip doesn't want to have to do this, but he knows this is the only way to protect Martha. There really is no other way of getting out of this but for him to protect Martha and for him to send her on that plane, which he doesn't initially want to do, but the only way to ensure her safety is to get her out of here and to get her out of his life, because that's the main reason why she's being targeted. The fact that she has a KGB husband and they know that he's KGB, that really concerns me. I think Philip has this idea that Martha's going to be safe, but I really feel that she definitely is not going to be safe. Knowing that Oleg and Tatiana, they're going after her, they're going to start this thing basically working for Oleg. I don't really know what's going on there, but they clearly want to help out Martha. And now knowing what Stan Agent Gad just found out, I really don't think this is the end of Martha. I think they want to imply that, but I definitely don't think it's the end of it. And the way this episode ends, I thought was fantastic. We see Elizabeth at home. She's getting ready to go to bed alone, basically just showing how alone Elizabeth is right now. Even though Philip is in her life and he does love her, things just don't feel the same for her. She really does feel like she's just alone. No one's really on her side. And it's mainly because of the fact that everyone cares about Martha, when I think she does, but obviously she doesn't have that empathy and that connection that Philip did to her. And Philip then sleeps at the safe house with Martha for one last night before she gets on the plane, leaves the country, and that's basically how this episode comes to a close. A very tragic end, but I really think the most inevitable end for her character. Is this the end of Martha? I don't know, but I really think this was probably the most inevitable end we could have had for her. But overall, guys, I'm glad you guys saw this episode. Love to hear your thoughts on it. And if you guys notice, this is my first video where I'm trying out some editing stuff. If you guys saw my last video, definitely check it out. I did a TED Talk for my English class. Basically, we had this project that we need to do, and I learned how to edit using that video, which you guys can check out. And I figured that, oh, I know how to edit. I now use this editing software called Filmora. I'm going to try it out. If you guys like it, I'm going to try it. Let me know if you guys like it, because I don't actually know if I'm good at it. I want I hope I am, but I'm going to try stuff out in this video, and I hope you guys enjoyed that. But let me know what you guys saw this episode. Love to hear your thoughts on it, and we'll see you guys in my next video, which will be either for Empire or The Path, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye. So overall, guys, this was a crazy episode. One of the most intense episodes I think we've ever had, The Americans, without a doubt. It was crazy. It was gripping. I was into it the whole time. Without a doubt, the best episode of the season. I think one of the best episodes they've ever done, personally. I mean, it was emotionally effective. It just hit every level perfectly. And there's so many questions I have now. Because of the fact that Martha's gone, like I said, this is definitely not the last we're going to see of her. The fact that he put her on that plane, I don't think is the end of it. I think he wants it to be, but it's just not. There's too much going on with Martha that could make me say, oh, she definitely is leaving the show. She's still a series regular and they haven't killed her off. And to me, I think that really does show that Martha is not done and that we are going to see her again. When exactly, I don't know. I think we're going to take a break from Martha for a little bit, but I do think that we definitely are going to see her again. But the other thing I'm most interested in is what's going on with Stan and Gad. Obviously, now they have this news. I don't really know what's going to happen there, what this is going to amount to. I really do have this feeling that Stan's going to start to think Philip. I mean, there are so many directions that point to Philip. Obviously, I don't think that's the main thing on his mind right now. I don't think he's really thinking, oh, Philip could be KGB. But I think at some point that has to kind of set in that there is some connections there. And there definitely is some stuff about Philip that is kind of shady. And I think that Stan eventually is going to realize that, which obviously concerns me. But we'll have to see what happens with that. I love the direction we're headed with Elizabeth, though, because you really do get that sense that while Philip feels that they're close, they really are getting more and more distant. The fact that they just want these separate things, it really is no longer just a small little fight that they're having. This is a much bigger concern because it's starting to interfere with everything. It's not just something that's interfering with their job. It's interfering with their marriage. It's interfering with their relationship to Paige. It's interfering with the way they feel about each other, really. And you really do feel that they're just more and more distant. And it's very sad to see, I have to say. I mean, obviously we knew for these two, we've seen them fight before. We know how different these two are personally, and I really do feel that it's probably going to be, eventually these two are just going to separate completely. I could really see that happening. I don't know if their marriage is going to separate, but I definitely think in terms of the way they think intellectually and just the way they are, I really do think they're going to be more and more separate as this goes on, which I really do love seeing. Oleg, Tatiana, and Arcady, I don't really know what's going on there, but like I said, they're definitely hunting down Martha. Not hunting down Martha, but they're going to try to save her. We'll have to see what's going on with that. I don't really know what that's all about. And then the only thing I do want to talk about is what's going on with Paige and what's going on with Paige. Because for me, I feel like Paige just feels like she's no longer, knows more than Henry. Because she doesn't. The only thing that she knows is that her parents are KGB and that they do these missions and that they don't tell her anything else. So she really feels like she's just as out of the loop as Henry. And I really do feel we're going to get to that point where she is going to freak out and she is going to tell Henry. And I really do feel this is not going to be a very tidy, neat season. And that's really the thing I think this episode shows, is that this is not going to be a neat season. Things aren't just going to close out in this way that Philip wants them to, and I really do think this episode really does show that. I think that's the one thing that I'm really looking forward to for the most part this season, and that's really the thing that this episode was. It was a non-stop thrill ride. It was crazy, but it's far from over, and that's something I love. We're only on episode 7. This felt like a season finale. It really did. I mean, I don't think I've seen an episode this crazy since probably the finale of season 2, but that was the finale. This is episode 7, and we're only on episode 7. This is just the beginning, and things are about to get crazier. I think that definitely is what this episode implies, and I can't wait to see how crazy things get, because I don't really know how crazy things are going to get, and that's something I really love. That uncertainty is what keeps me loving the show and what keeps me watching, and of course, what makes me praise this show as one of the best shows on TV without a doubt, which I think this episode just shows as one of the best episodes of TV I've seen so far this year without a doubt. I mean, just incredible stuff, and it really doesn't get better than this. It really doesn't. I mean, obviously, there are some amazing episodes of The Americans, but this is definitely very high up there, and I absolutely loved everything about this episode.